Madam Chair, we're live.
Okay, at 5 o'clock, I'm calling to order the Finance Committee for December 4th. This is the last meeting of this committee this year and the last meeting for two of our members. So we'll make it a good meeting to send you off on. All right, if we could get a roll call vote, that'd be terrific. Thank you.
Certainly, Madam Chair. Councillor Cassidy.
Here.
Councillor Lindell.
She's excused.
Thank you. Councillor Rivera.
Here.
Councilwoman Villarreal.
Present.
Chair Rivera-Worth.
I am here.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Great. Do we have changes to the agenda? I believe there has been something taken off or we're not going to be doing tonight.
Madam Chair, that is correct. Staff has one change to the agenda. We are removing item Z and we'll prepare that for the January 2024 meeting as we are working with the budget office on a salary analysis for that item.
Okay, and I'm sorry, the letter didn't quite come through. Item what?
Madam, item Z.
Z.
As
Okay.
in Z.
I wasn't sure if you said C or E and didn't even contemplate Z. So, all right, item Z is not going to be heard tonight.
Madam Chair, can you repeat that again, the reason for pulling that?
Madam Chair and Councilwoman Villarreal, the team is working on a salary analysis with the budget office for that position.
Okay, any other changes? And if not, is there a motion?
Move to approve as amended.
Okay.
Motion and a second to approve the agenda for tonight. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? That motion passes. We do have a number of things that have been pulled off of consent, and Director Oster, I'm going to go to you on that because I know they've changed. There's been a little bit of back and forth throughout the day, so I think you have the final list.
Madam Chair, yes, I do have what I believe is the final list. If there are any things that we missed, please let us know. But I think the items that we have that have been pulled for discussion this evening are item G as in goat, L as in log, Q as in quest, R as in roar, X as in X, Y as in yes, A, that's double A, AB, AB, and then AD. So there are a total of 9 items pulled. I'll just go through the list again. G.
Madam Chair, before you go through it again, I don't know if anyone else pulled AD as in donkey, and I'm gonna ask, I'm gonna talk with the chief separately. I don't think we need to wait till the end of the agenda. I just had minor questions, so I don't know if anyone else, but I had AD and I no longer want to pull that.
And I think on a similar vein, I don't think we need to pull items. I believe they are, hold on, X and Y.
Okay, great, excellent. So then the revised list of items to be discussed tonight is item G, item L, item Q, item R, item AA, and item AB.
Okay, can we get a motion?
Move to approve as amended.
Second.
Motion and a second, sorry. Motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as amended. All those in favor, aye. Anybody opposed? That motion passes. All right, we do have a couple of things to do before we get into the consent agenda. The first one, of course, is a recognition of staff, and I'm going to turn this over to Director Oster.
Yes, Madam Chair. We have a certificate of appreciation for a staff member who unfortunately is unable to be here tonight, but I wanted to go ahead and present it anyway. And so we have this lovely certificate here for our team member, Leona R. Shaw. And it says, this certificate is given to Leona R. Shaw in appreciation for her performance, service, and dedication to the City of Santa Fe Finance Department. I'd like to share a little bit about Leona with you. Leona was recently promoted to the role of Accounting Financial Analyst. She has worked with the City of Santa Fe for 17 years, beginning as a customer service representative for the Water Division before transitioning to the Finance Department. Leona worked in the cashier's office for 10 years and is now part of our accounts payable team that gets payments out to vendors every Thursday. We send out checks, and Leona is instrumental in that process. As I mentioned, Leona was recently promoted, so we're very excited that she's decided to take on that new role of accounting financial analyst. Outside of work, Leona enjoys live horse racing and has been to all of the New Mexico racetracks. She is an animal lover and often volunteers at animal shelters and grooming shops. Her message for 2023 is help whoever, whenever you can. Be grateful for the little things. So I would like to congratulate Leona and just express my absolute heartfelt gratitude for her being a member of the City of Santa Fe team for 17 years and in Finance Department for over 10 years. We're delighted. I'm sorry that Leona wasn't able to be here this evening, but I will be happy to present the award to her tomorrow in the office. And this is something that we're going to be starting to do monthly, is staff recognition in the Finance Committee. So I look forward to recognizing more of our outstanding team members in the new calendar year.
Great. Thank you, Director Oster. And, please feel free to invite her back the next time we do this in case it works better for her schedule. We can at least introduce her to the public and what she does. So thank you. All right. With that, we have a special guest here tonight for an economic update. We have Dr. Riley White, who I'm going to let him introduce himself because he has a variety of affiliations, and I'll let you use the ones that you want to. So welcome, and thank you for coming again to see the Finance Committee and give us your crystal ball wisdom on where we stand. Dr. White, I think you have to turn your mic on so the public can hear you. We can hear your voice carries very well, but the public can't.
So this should work. Thank you so much. My apologies. So thank you so much again. My name is Dr. Riley White. You may call me Riley, whatever's easiest. I am a professor of finance at the University of New Mexico and an associate dean there. Here I'm speaking in the capacity of Erebor LLC, my financial consulting firm. So in this capacity today, I prepared a presentation to give you kind of an overview of the economy as it stands and where we've been, and as it stands and where we're going to be in the near future. So I think that's pretty good. We can kind of move along to the first, there we go, macroeconomic update. There's me, you don't need to hear about it. Next slide. Anyway, so here's the big deal. Look at the summary so far. One of the best news I can convey to you about the economy, I sat here last year, about a year ago, and I was asked, is there going to be a recession? And I said, so 50%, maybe more than 50% chance of a recession. We have since avoided that recession. We were almost there if things had gone differently in March of this year. There was a banking crisis spawned by Silicon Valley Bank that if the Treasury and the Federal Reserve had not enacted a line of credit to these banks in the way that they did, would have resulted in a regional contagion becoming a national one. So we avoided that. And the good news is the consumption has been maintained, bank growth has been maintained. However, the trajectory right now is evidenced by this chart you can kind of see, where if you look at the recovery since the pandemic, one thing to think about is this is an economy that rebounded, but is slowing in its rebound. And if we look at the number of economic figures or data that suggest things continue to slow, they vastly outnumber what suggests that things are starting to heat up again. And this is expected. To intervene, we came across a period of very high inflation last year. 9.1% is what we peaked at last June. Since that time, a year and a half ago, we've been able to reduce inflation to about 3.2% year on year. The Federal Reserve raised rates faster than any time in the last 40 years. And as a consequence, this has had the effect of slowing down some of the economic growth that we've seen. Big picture, Lower inflation, but strong third quarter GDP performance. That's good news. And it means that overall, the economy is still humming along. However, other indicators are a mixed bag. Some of these factors, like gross domestic investment, which is kind of a measure of what's being invested, a good predictor of the future values of economic growth, have been fairly flat in the last couple months. That does suggest continued slowing. Headwinds, including declining credit quality. One debate we have, especially with my peers in the industry, are, oh, is this the time? Are we going to start seeing a growth period in the economic period after a period of uncertainty? We're not quite there yet. And one of the reasons we're not there is because credit quality continues to decline. This means that default rates continue to rise, although they're nowhere near where they were back in 2008 and before. But there's also a decline in consumer confidence, decline in consumer credit quality, and concerns about how this will impact the markets in the next year. So when we think about persistently low real estate inventories, even though mortgage rates shot up this year, it reached 8% a couple weeks back, since the 30-year mortgage falls around 7.22% right now. That is a significant increase, and it means that a buyer who bought a home in January 2021 for the same price mortgage would be paying more than 60% more per month now for that same mortgage. It is actually the worst time to be a new home buyer that we have on measured record, with resulting the incredibly high mortgage rates compounded by very high asset prices. And so, although yes, the economy in aggregate is doing well, individual experiences vary depending on these levels. So next slide, we'll go into a few more details about this, please. Thank you so much. So one big reason we were able to avoid a recession is this chart at the right here. And it shows this big increase and looks like this big sort of roller coaster ride. This is what we call excess savings in the economy. When we had the pandemic happen, we ran into this huge economic distress that caused a 14% unemployment rate, millions of people out of work. In the short term, it was devastating for a lot of the economy. It was devastating for the city of Santa Fe. In the long run, though, the benefits from $5 trillion of aggregate government spending in response to COVID-related stimulus programs had the effect of jumpstarting the economy when it needed the most. It also meant that a lot of that money flowed into excess savings. One thing to note is that excess savings, which is used to power consumption, is more or less almost depleted. And one thing of note is that we thought it would be depleted last year. It isn't depleting by that rate. We're looking for a full depletion mid-time next year. But in the meantime, this is a sign. This indicates to us that there's substantial risk going forward, looking at how consumers spend. In the engine of economic growth, that consumer spending that drives so much of gross receipts, taxes, among other things in the economy, does stand to be under a critical period of stress in about a year or two's time. When we look at the left, one thing to note as well, if we think about our disposable income and consumption has remained high because powered in part by this excess savings. One thing to note on this isn't, of course, the full picture. We're looking at aggregates here. Individual income quintiles have vastly different experience. Aggregate savings, if you're in the middle and upper income tiers, have increased since before the pre-pandemic eras. If you're under the 40th percentile in your aggregate income that you earn, you've actually seen a stable or decline amount of money in your savings account. So it's very much a tale of multiple Americas at once. So move on to the next slide, please, and I can reiterate some more. So one thing that was a concern in March of this year, we had the Silicon Valley regional banking crisis occur. And then we saw a few other banks that were very large also fail. One risk with banking contagions, and as a former banker before I was an academic, is that the sense of nervousness that comes around being in the finance industry, the sense of concern can spread. The engine of economic growth, economic activity, is in part banks willing to lend loans to individuals who need it. And there was a fear that those spigots would turn off if the Treasury hadn't intervened the way it had by allowing banks access to capital in ways they couldn't before. So March passed, we had access to capital. Bankers came out in a survey in May and said, we're going to be a little bit more conservative about how we issue loans. And we've actually seen that play out. And unfortunately, the October numbers actually show a little bit of a decline in bank activity in very meaningful ways. And that suggests that there is still continued slowing in the economy as a whole. Next slide, please. So one thing is, of course, if the economy is doing so well, how come it doesn't feel that way? Are real wages rising? The short answer, and this is a chart from Joe Politano, who has a great little blog and a Twitter feed as well. He does a lot of economics related analysis, but it's beautifully put. Median real wages are up, but they're below trend. So although over the long run, we think ourselves of getting raises, we think of things meeting inflation and getting slightly ahead of where inflation might be, real wages are in fact rising. Real wages are rising faster than the inflation rate at this moment. But because of the pandemic, because of the very high inflation of a year and a half ago to 2 years ago, we are still tracking behind our trend. And so that means that even though wages are up, they're not up to our long-term trend and not up certainly in respect over the long term of how we've seen the increase in the price of goods. So next slide. Another thing to note, we've been bolstered by an incredibly strong job market. When people have jobs and they have choices on where to find jobs, we find that people are more confident in their spending and they're more able to consume more and help increase economic growth. Job growth is slowing, both on the month-to-month data that we've seen. Jobs reports are coming in positive, but they're not as strong as they were. This is what we expected would happen. When we raise the cost of funds, we raise the discount rate, we raise the cost of doing business. So all of the loans that businesses take out cost more money to take out. And as a consequence, things that they want to do, things they want to build become harder to do and harder to come by. So, so they make decisions at the margin. I'm not going to build that factory. I won't expand and build that second location. And as a consequence, we see less hiring. And so in here, we've seen that. And the picture for New Mexico and Santa Fe within this has been fairly mixed. New Mexico, we're starting to see some of that, those unemployment levels tick up after being near 50-year lows for our state. Here in Santa Fe, we have a slightly different job market. Unemployment actually rises in summer. We have an influx of summer workers to support the leisure and hospitality industries. As a consequence, the influx of workers increases the size of our labor force, but it also increases the number of people who are looking for work and increases the unemployment rate. So you see here, and it's hard to read in the small print, but unemployment rates went up in Santa Fe in summer, and now they're headed back down again. A very unique characteristic of our local economy that you see often in seasonal or tourism-based economies. Next slide. I apologize for being hoarse, by the way. I had a cold last week that my 9-year-old son gave me. It's one of those things. It just lingers. So year-on-year CPI inflation fell to 3.2% in October. That is a significant decrease. It still remains above the Federal Reserve's target rate of 2%. Now, inflation in services, what does that mean? We've gone from a position where goods inflation, that was the original story, durable goods. That was supply chains causing shortages, causing it being very difficult to find products to use for manufacturing, products to ship overseas and import. Now, the inflation that we're watching and that Fed's watching is the service sector inflation. And that refers to things like the cost of your haircut, the cost of renting a car. That refers to the cost of any engaged service, which is the majority of our GDP growth in the United States. Now, goods inflation has turned into good deflation as supply chains have improved, but service inflation remains somewhat high. Some of that also includes things where we're looking at a lot of things that are likely to fall off in the coming months. Increases in the price of shelter, also a huge issue. Forward bond markets are actually predicting, and this is an interesting thing. In the last couple of months, you noticed the Fed pause. They said, we're not raising rates at this moment. Are they going to raise rates again? Are they going to continue to raise rates in the economy? And when they raise rates, that increases the cost of doing business. And when they lower rates, they lower the cost of doing business. But when we look to the bond markets, especially in the ones that are over the near term, 1 or 2 years ahead, the bond markets are currently implying a slow decline in the federal funds rate. Now, the Fed hasn't gone out and reduced short-term rates. The Fed decides one interest rate, overnight lending to large banks. They haven't lowered that rate in response to a non-recession event since 1998. And that was a time during an international financial crisis. So this would be an unheard of thing without a recession. But I think judging by the Fed, there is a window of opportunity where it could happen in a very realistic way, particularly if inflation continues to fall and shelter inflation remains under control. That could be a realistic outcome If there is an increase in Fed rates, maybe one more. Apart from that, I think we've seen it all. And so the Fed is going to see how inflation plays out. Inflation varies a lot month to month. A lot of the volatility comes from stuff like that. So next slide, please. Mortgages as a whole. Now, one aspect that we hear often is if mortgage rates are so high, why is real estate also so expensive? Why? This is an atypical phenomenon. Normally, when rates are really, really low, that incentivizes people to bid up for the price of homes. So low rates equal increasing asset prices, increasing price of homes. And normally high rates have the opposite effect. Like a balloon, they help deflate asset prices. So what we have right now, though, is mortgage rates that have shot up significantly over the last 2.5 years. However, most people who possess a mortgage operate a mortgage that's in the blue category right there. The dark blue and light blue numbers indicate mortgage rates of 4% and below. And when you go above and you look at those higher rates, that red marker there is 6% and above. That's an increasing number of people who have those mortgages, but the percent of people who have those mortgages are quite small. People are making decisions about when to move, how to move, depending on their mortgages. And right now, people who have locked in a very low mortgage feel comfortable in not selling their home. And what that does is reduce the inventories available for sale for homes and reduces the amount of churn. If there isn't enough churn in the market, not enough houses available for sale, prices don't adjust accordingly. And we've seen that here, and we're seeing that nationally as well. So next slide. Residential property market. Here's a visualization. Green line on top is Santa Fe. Below that, we have Albuquerque in the state of New Mexico in yellow. So those three colors represent the increase in trajectory we've seen over the last 7 years or so in the price of real estate. So although it has leveled off in aggregate in Santa Fe, it remains very expensive, and even I would argue prohibitively so for the median household income in Santa Fe. So low supply means higher prices, and higher property values lead to higher property tax revenue over the long run. We know we're capped to New Mexico state valuation caps on tax revenue of 3% per year or 6% every 2 years, but that's going to continue to process through the tax markets. And so when we look at things like the property taxes in Santa Fe, this maintains a very steady positive growth, not a significantly positive growth, but a significant growth nonetheless. As some of these prices do churn, as more real estate comes online and real estate does get sold, albeit more slowly than might be reflected in a market that was more equitably priced. Next slide, please. So this is also fascinating. So going down to apartments for a second. So you've seen an explosion of building and apartments, and overall, the multifamily construction boom that's affected Santa Fe has also affected the rest of the country. In 2022, 2023, we're seeing some of those take place in the effect that they're having an effect on the upward price and the cost of rents. We saw a surge of interest in house prices. We saw a surge of interest in rent prices when people became priced out of the housing market across the country. And so here in Santa Fe, looking at the rent trends between studio, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, and 3 bedroom, it's very choppy. This data comes from rent.com. They collect a large amount of data from available listings of apartments that they offer that are available to them. And you can see the good news is it's gotten more steady as opposed to an upward increase, but it remains prohibitively high. In rent.com's estimate, particularly in the chart at the right, looking at where the rents are being offered and what those prices are, the vast majority of units remain above $2,000 per month in the city, based on the data from rent.com. Other data I have, apartments.com has it slightly lower, about $200 to $300 per month lower. Both use databases that reflect real world leases in real time. But when I asked the question of, can I see some of that data, they did not. So I'm missing it this way. So it is a very interesting phenomenon and contemporary to what we've seen. Very low amounts of inexpensive apartments available. Next slide, please. So short-term rentals. How's the short-term rental market doing? Overall, it's been relatively steady. Despite the interest in things like Airbnb and Vrbo's and other things, we have right now about 2,000 units in the Santa Fe area. AirDNA collects this data. They maintain a region that reflects Santa Fe that goes from Pojoaque down to La Cienega and kind of east to Glorieta. And so between that area, there's about 2,000 units of which the city of Santa Fe is encapsulated. In that area, you're seeing relatively stable growth, but a sizable average per room rate of about $326 per night. Short-term rentals remain fairly steady year on year. Expect greater multifamily market stabilization following historic highs in apartment construction. Has those construction units gone through the building permits here in Santa Fe? We know we've seen building permits come cyclically, and we've seen a bunch of those in different cycles. There is a downward trend that we've seen over the last year. Part of that is due to some interesting phenomena. One aspect of having such a increase in the value of mortgage rates is builders have found it very challenging of new homes to sell the new homes for what they initially thought they would sell for. And so as a consequence, across the country, this is one of the rare occasions when new homes are actually selling for less than existing homes. In part, and one discouraging part about this is there's a great need in various parts of the country to increase housing stock, of which Santa Fe is one of them. And builders right now, although construction remains relatively robust in the country, the builders are looking at other options to expand single-family house construction. And as a consequence, there's going to be some potentially reduced activity in the next 2 to 3 years. And this is all based on a very sort of long-term delay that happens in the construction process of homes themselves. Next slide, please. So one aspect to show you kind of another reason that the economy, although doing well, there are some sources of concern. Small business bankruptcies. 2023, you'll notice we're tracking significantly higher than in the previous 3 years. This is a real factor, and it's due in part due to increased costs. Labor costs are cited, among other things. But also, this is also a sign that many businesses are struggling. At the same time, the good news is new business originations remain relatively high. So although businesses are going out of business, new businesses are coming online. Next slide, please. So quickly, to kind of give you a revenue and macroeconomic summary. Whoops, I did none of those correctly. Risks. Credit delinquencies. Household debt are still rising, albeit moderately. They remain below Great Recession levels. It's not crisis yet. We do have over $1.6 trillion of automotive loan debt. Last year, when you bought a new car in New Mexico, 20% of people who bought a new car are spending more than $1,000 per month on that car, driven heavily by trucks. On the other side, we have other factors. Over $1 trillion of student loan debt, over $1 trillion of credit card debt across the country. Now, these remain, in terms of long-term averages, when we compare the household balance sheets, we're still favorable to where we were 10 years ago, but we are getting less favorable each passing month. High consumption in combination with internet sales tax has really helped Santa Fe expand GRT revenue. And that revenue should be more or less maintained in the next year, but with some cautious adages attached to it. Lodgers tax revenues are expected to remain robust. One interesting aspect, if you go dig deeper into the lodgers tax revenues in Santa Fe historically, apart from the very unique COVID-19 pandemic, where you had a tourism-focused shutdown that shut down and drastically altered our revenue structure as a city. If we go back in time, 2008 financial crisis, 2000, 2001, the impact on lodgers tax was not very significant. In fact, it was relatively light in comparison. This is partially due to the fact that Santa Fe remains a target market, of course, for luxury spending and higher and middle high income spending, which are pretty robust during recessionary periods. People who travel internationally, travel domestically, they might switch to go to Santa Fe. People who domestically travel to Santa Fe may still continue to do so. Property tax revenue will slowly trend upward. There is some risks going forward, though. There we go. The economic growth continues to slow across a number of metrics, just straight across the board. It is slower than, the good news is this is the kind of very light landing that we hoped would happen for the economy. This is better news than we anticipated. We don't want, barring a macroeconomic crisis, barring another banking issue that we don't know yet, but it seems like we might be in for hopefully a soft landing, which would be preferable. As long as inflation continues to approach the 2% target, the Fed may consider either keeping the discount rate steady, or perhaps if the bond markets are right, and often they are not. And I want to point out the bond markets are really terrible about predicting the future. But if they are correct, that would be a very, very interesting phenomenon that would help take some of that pressure off. You lower those short-term rates and the yield curve becomes upwardly sloping again, you've got a case for growth. Inflation, supply chains, geopolitical risks remain crucially important. Any of this can throw off what some of this mean. It's going to be noisy. You'll have some months that come in with higher inflation than others, but the trend will continue down. That's kind of the overall approach, and I welcome questions as you have.
Thank you, Dr. White, for being here again and giving us benefit of your experience and analysis. Are there questions from the committee? Councilwoman Villarreal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Dr. White, for being with us, and the information you always provide is very helpful to kind of look big picture and then kind of go into city level. So thank you for that. I was just curious about, I think you were referencing it when you said geopolitical risks. So I'm assuming you're talking about war. And
Yes.
and so I was wondering if you could elaborate more about how that could potentially affect the U.S. economy
Yes.
and, well, potentially New Mexico as well.
Of course, and we're interesting. One aspect about our state is we have the one of the highest ratios of government workers in the state compared to the working force than any other state, the overall labor force, I should say. And that's both at the federal, state, and local levels, if we add those up. So when we think about this, it has mixed messages here. And so one is that internationally, conflict is challenging, and conflicts such as wars and other things present both short-term and long-term difficulties. For instance, the United States being involved or more heavily involved in a short-term conflict, well, that does result in increased spending in military regimes and military purposes. That does have some other effects in the economy that are less desirable and difficult to repair. In the long run, we do have to answer serious questions about our national debt. We have to answer serious questions about our availability and willingness to pay for certain things, and the priorities that we have to pay for across our economy is the nature of politics. But for New Mexico, some concerns when I speak of geopolitical risk, we would say 3 years ago, what does that look like? It's hard to envision in the way that a pandemic had uprooted our preconceived notions of our economic response to a pandemic, what greater involvement in a geopolitical conflict would render us. The risks are low, to be sure. The risks are low that we involve ourselves in something globally. The most practical situation is that would affect the greatest amount of people would be, we have a global geopolitical conflict. It could be something minor, it could be something major. For instance, something that affects the price of oil in the Middle East, a disaster that affects an ongoing campaign, the use or escalation of an existing war. What that does is it creates defensiveness in nation states. Nation states that recoil from the economy. And this is an overarching sense, but there was a study that was just published on this in the last year. When we are unable or unwilling to trade with our neighbors, it does have a negative effect to our GDP. And the biggest consequence of that is an isolated world where we're not involved in trying to replicate many industries domestically that we don't have the ability to replicate. That has the negative effects to the effect of 0.5% to 1.5% of our GDP. Not significant in the long run, but that's with existing trade policies being the way they are. If that expanded, more protectionism, greater isolation, you would have multiple points on GDP that would be affected. And that would reduce opportunities for industries, both directly affected by the economy and those that are indirectly affected. And so in a way, there are many ways the world can think of ways for it to become poorer as well as richer. And that would be one of them.
Thank you for those details. I think I've heard in the past that war actually, we benefit from it, which is
Oh,
pretty
if you're not-
sad.
if you don't have people, that's a good question. You don't have people, if you're financing a war or buying things, certainly, if you're producing products for the war, you can argue that.
Right.
There are geopolitical consequences to that.
Yep.
Trading partners, the inability to trade, looking at this, our biggest trading partners are Mexico, China, those areas. If we run into difficult diplomatic straits with either of those countries, it's very devastating for us. And we've seen that with China so far. So we do have consequences that we have to endure.
Thank you for that. And the other piece, which wasn't shocking, but I guess I just, to see it on on the presentation was, just confirm what people are saying in the community, but the rent costs, like you said, 71% is at least around 2,100.
According to the rent.com numbers, that's correct.
Right.
Apartments.com offers a slightly more robust estimate in the high, almost 2,000, about 1,700, but both are very high. When we look at, say, a medium, although the average household income is about 90,000, the median's about 61,000. So in Santa Fe, so that becomes prohibitively expensive for an average family.
So I think you kind of showed this in other slides, but that does affect our workforce and the ability to live and work here. Is there something?
100%. Thank you so much, Councilor Villarreal. I'm sorry, I'm so excited about this topic. If I ask my students, why don't they work in Santa Fe? They work in Albuquerque. They can't afford to live here. And if they have the same job in Albuquerque and Rio Rancho and it pays about the same, why wouldn't they live there? And it's a hard thing. And it's a phenomenon that is, and the solutions are challenging, right? So that's the difficult part. It's the thing to grapple with. Yeah. But I apologize, I interrupted you.
No, that was actually it. I just wanted to get your thoughts on that, because it is a problem and we know that, but just to see it again, and it exacerbates a situation that we already have. So, and I guess I always think about how when we have what you said was the multifamily boom, and how that you would typically think that would help us reduce the amount or the cost of rent. Can you say why it doesn't?
Great question, Councilor Villarreal. So in absolutely, the increased number of units does have the effect of reducing the increased growth rate and the price of rent. So when we look at this picture, it's an interesting answer. So each city has a different equilibrium rate, in short answer. So the equilibrium rate for Albuquerque is different than Santa Fe. Santa Fe is unique because it's desirable. People like moving here from across the country. People like moving here from across the state. And this creates a really, really interesting phenomenon. So because so many people would like to live here and want to live here, the demand for property in general is quite high. And as a consequence, the solution is always an aggregate to increase the number of units that are available, one way or another. So there are many different policies that can do that, either in the way that homes are built or zoning or whatever mechanism exists in different cities and what different cities do in different aspects. In Santa Fe, you have a situation where even though you've seen an explosion of multifamily units, the demand for multifamily units is yet greater. And that's the most unfathomable thing. And in addition, what makes multifamily units so attractive, especially the 2 and 3 bedroom units, which command the highest prices, are because they become alternatives for people to live in because the housing market themselves is something that is unaffordable. So, just a casual thing I was looking at, I gave an example to one of my classes, teach an executive MBA class, and we were looking at some things. And, I was explaining the nature of housing markets and their effects, and Santa Fe is a good example. You can go on Zillow or something like that and examine, what would an average family, a median household income family in Santa Fe be able to afford? If you follow the income numbers, median value, Census Bureau, about $61,000, $62,000 a household income. You keep to a 40% debt to income ratio. You're liable, and you find somehow assistance to get the equivalent of 20% down, which is a huge stretch for most anybody. Then you're limited to maybe a $250,000 unit. So if you were to buy that in a housing capacity, you can look online. Zillow has maybe 3 for Santa Fe, all 700 to 800 square foot units that are probably inappropriate for a family of 4. On the meantime, so that pushes people into the apartments and pushes more people who would otherwise be interested in buying real estate into apartments themselves. And so you have this factor that leans into it. So ultimately, it's a question of units available. It does have an effect in aggregate, but demand in Santa Fe is so high, and the proportions of what the city needs versus what's available are vastly different. Vastly different.
Thank you for the insight. I always appreciate your information, and there's always questions that come up more and more, but I will pause and let my colleagues ask questions. Thanks so much, Dr. White.
Thank you, Councilor Villarreal.
Other questions from the committee? Great. Well, I would agree with Councilwoman Villarreal that it is interesting to see the data again on the housing issue, which of course we're all pretty aware of. But when you see the quantitative analysis that confirms what we know to be true and what we hear, it's definitely sobering. That's a good way to put it. All right. Well, thank you for being here again, Dr. White. Really appreciate it, and hope to see you again soon.
Thank you so much, and it's an honor to be here. Thank you all.
All right, we have one more presentation. It's the audit update by Director Oster.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the Finance Committee. Our focus on the audits since the last update at governing body has been getting FY22 submitted. Many finance staff, the auditors, and some of our consultants worked through the weekend and are continuing to work this evening. Once I have confirmation that the report has been submitted, we will let you all know. We did have the exit conference this afternoon, and we are scheduling briefings later this week with the council to let you know how the exit conference went. Madam Chair, that's my update for tonight.
Great. If there are no questions, I'm gonna go to the consent agenda. So we have, first item pulled was item G, I believe, which is a request for the approval of a third amendment to the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA, for work-based learning to reflect the city of Santa Fe's living wage ordinance and to reallocate $153,800 of project budget from bucket 5, which is dropout recovery internship, to bucket 1, which is youth senior internships, increasing the number of student interns paid through bucket 1. And I'm going to let our presenters introduce themselves because I see there are a few of you and only one listed, or maybe there are two listed here. So Councilwoman Villarreal, did you pull this item? Okay. So maybe when you come up, if you could just tell us your name and your title.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is Joanna Nelson, and I'm the Director of Economic Development.
Do you want me to, well, maybe what would be helpful, and it might be able to answer my question, is just to explain why this change occurred, other than, I guess I just want to know more about beyond the minimum wage. I know that bumped up the amount, and I was curious about what that means for the dropout prevention funds, because it looked like they were cut in half. So if you could just kind of give us a snapshot about what that means for the programming, and yeah, maybe you could
Sure.
start.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Councilor Villarreal, we are having a lot of success working with Santa Fe Public Schools. In fact, we just had a workforce conference today, and Jose, the director, gave a great presentation and had their students there, and we're able to attest to just the wonderful success that they're experiencing in that program. They are over enrolled and have had an increase and a continuing increase in interest in that program. So they have requested additional funding to get them to the end of the fiscal year, which is June 30th. And we are moving funding from bucket 5, as you can see, into the current program, work-based learning. SFPS has secured funding through WIOA to address the dropout, the bucket 5. And so they've secured additional funding to address those needs. Another point to make as well is that the program does serve dropout students as well. And I am joined by my colleagues, Sophie Andar and Casey Dalbor, if you need additional information as well.
Can you repeat what program allowed for more funding sources that support, I think what did you call it?
It's,
not to
it's an
drop out.
acronym called WIOA, which stands for Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act. And
Welcome, Sophie.
My name is Sophie Andar, and I'm Program Manager for the Youth and Family Services Division. I just wanted to clarify that WIOA is the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act, and Santa Fe Public Schools is receiving the supplemental funds from Help New Mexico, which is a sub grantee for WIOA. So they are ensuring that the services for the out-of-school youth are going to continue to be met, but just through another funding source that is more specifically tailored for that population of young people.
That's relieving. I was trying to figure out the amount adjustment. So the amount that was in bucket 5 for dropout recovery, that was reduced to half. Is that correct? Or I don't know about the amount, but I know the student served was half, and it went down, it says, to 59,000. And so I guess I was trying to figure out if that amount went directly up to bucket 1. I was trying to compare the last version of it. It was 212,000. 212 for 40 students, and then it went down to 59,000 for 20 students.
That's correct, Councilwoman Villarreal. And all those funds have been reallocated to the juniors and seniors. There are currently 75 interns, and the word is spreading like wildfire among the students. There's a lot of enthusiasm, and so they're anticipating more students enrolling, but if those funds aren't reallocated at this time, they won't be able to continue payment throughout the next couple months.
Okay, that's good. Good to know. And I'm glad that the other bucket will be covered with other funding sources and other programmatic initiatives. I'm curious just about the students. Do you all, how do you decide what departments they go to for the internships? Aren't they assigned to certain departments within the city?
Chairwoman and members of the committee, it is a process that is directed by Jose, and they are given information about the departments, and it's a matchmaker process.
And is that all departments or just a few that decided to participate?
I think typically a call has gone out to the other departments in the city to inquire if they want to participate. And I know for the summer program, we all went to the convening, and they had all the students, and they kind of like a speed dating situation, and they came and talked to us. And so it's a matchmaker of, are they interested? And then are they curious about the skills that they want to develop as well?
Cool, thank you. I think that's it. Just wanted to make sure how that was gonna, the equitable moving in the different buckets, because I did think that the dropout recovery internships were important too, but I'm relieved to hear there's other funding sources. So thank you so much. Thank you all for being here.
Chairwoman, members of the council, thank you so much.
Any other questions from the committee? Is there a motion?
Move to approve?
Second.
Motion and a second to approve this item. Director Oster, can we get a roll call, please?
Certainly, Madam Chair. Counselor Cassett,
Yes.
Counselor Rivera,
Yes.
Councilwoman Villarreal,
Yes.
Chair Romero Worth.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. We are now on to item L. Request for approval of the agreement with Axon Enterprise, Inc. for equipment and services in the total amount of, I'm guessing this is 11 million, is that? Okay, I got the commas in the right place. $11,027,153 through June 30th, 2030. We have Deputy Chief of Police Ben Valdez with us. I believe, Councilwoman, you pulled this item as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, DC Valdez, for being here. Just wanted to clarify or just hear from you. So it sounds like you all are pleased with Axon, and you're going to move on to with the current package and some additional components and other offerings. And I was curious, I couldn't determined from the packet material. From what we've started with their contract, in 2021, that current package, has that stayed the same in terms of costs?
Madam Chair, Councilwoman Villarreal. So what we're doing right now is we're going to do an early renewal on the contract.
So we can avoid the 10% increase? Okay.
And it's going to include the items that we currently have with the Officer Safety Plan 7, but it will also include the build out for the new records management system, which allow our officers to do reports and allow the system to operate like an ecosystem. So it'll tie in everything that we currently have from Axon and make it part of that records management system. In addition, for our use of force reports and complaints, that'll also be covered under Axon Standards, which is a product that works side by side with records as well.
Got it. So if we would have kept with the current package without the add-ons, would it have been the same since we're renewing early? Or were there increases for various reasons?
There were increases and for a number of reasons. One of them is because a couple of extra products that we're receiving. One of them, again, is the one-time cost to stand up the records management. That was something we thought we were going to be able to do in the previous contract, but it needed a different mechanism. So we've been working on that for about the last 9 months to 12 months. But in doing so, we also evaluated what other items we can include into this contract, which we saw a lot of value with the Axon Air with our recently launch program with the drones. And from that standpoint, it makes it very easy for us to fulfill IPRA requests if there are any requests for any drone footage or flight records. But it also keeps track of all the training records for those pilots that we have licensed to operate those devices. We've seen a lot of great success with that because the city attorney's office, as of about 4 to 6 weeks ago, they've been fulfilling a lot of our IPRA requests by and large through the Axon product, because they're able to get our reports from that, they're able to get our videos from that, and it allows them to be more proficient and efficient in what they're doing in providing those documents. So when we talk about transparency, this is a tool that's helping us leverage that through technology. And again, we've had a great experience with Axon thus far, and we're confident to see where it's going to go in the future as well. That's what's really promising is what we're getting with this contract. It's not just what Axon can provide right now. They are constantly upgrading the technology to meet future needs, and it helps us out with developing those needs to make our officers more efficient. And with efficiency, we can also see that it frees up time for them to engage in other policing activities.
Thank you. Let's see. Was there another, let's see, I'm trying to remember in the notes, you talked about how there would be an increase. Is that after the 7-year contract or was that in between? I can't remember.
So what's good about the way we established the pricing for this, we won't need to see an increase this fiscal year, which will be very, very helpful for us to get this contract going. Next budget, we are going to come back to ask for the amount for that one-time cost for the RMS be built out. And then in 2025, when the original contract would have been up for renewal, that's when we'll see an increase for the additional services that we're receiving. However, once we sign the contract, we will have access to those services as soon as it is signed and it's in place. So we'll be able to utilize RMS once it is developed and it's live. But Axon Air will take a very short time for us to get that going, and also trying to update our use of force documentation. We use one that works pretty good. This one's going to make it even better because it's all under the same umbrella, which is helpful. You don't have to contend with conversions of files from one platform to another and then making sure that they are compatible. Because they're all in the same ecosystem, it's all compatible.
Thank you. And the last thing I was just curious about, the component that we hadn't really seen, or I can't remember in our last Axon. I don't feel like we talked about it too much, or actually I remember you saying that we hadn't really fully implemented the empathy training devices. Is that correct? The last time that you presented to us for an update for Axon, that hadn't been implemented yet. Can you say more about how, if that, like what that's looking like now moving forward with this contract?
Yes, absolutely. I was able to go to a summit with Axon a couple months ago, and one thing we saw with the current headsets we have, they work pretty good. We saw them through the demonstrations when Axon came for their roadshow. They have another system that, again, is part of the refresh that's in this contract that we were able to see a couple months ago, which is pretty amazing. What you're able to do with those headsets, and because again, the advancement technology is there, it really helped out. And I was just speaking to the gentleman from Axon today about it with the less lethal device that they have. With that less lethal device, you're able to utilize it in scenarios, and you're able to get more manipulations with it, with the headset on, and a lot more training than you would get if you would utilize, let's say, a cartridge on an actual device. So it's a twofold win for us. One, cost-wise, we're not utilizing a lot of supplies. And then the second part is we're getting a lot of benefits from that reality-based training that we're able to do with those headsets. So like I mentioned earlier, I really like what they have available right now that we do have. One challenge that we have seen is, again, with our requirements we have for training and with staffing and trying to get this stuff implemented to our current training plan. It's been a little bit of a challenge for us. I know that our instructors really have a large preference on reality-based training where they'd have someone that is dressed for the scenario, and if they see that they need to make an adjustment during the training scenario, they can make it right there on the fly. So if they see if someone is not getting the stimulus that they should have to do something, they can get them stimulated to say, hey, look, I need them to either engage in conversation with this person or to ask this question. With technology, it's also there, but it takes the prompt from the person that's operating the iPad to do so. So I know they favor reality-based where you actually have a role player in that scenario. But again, there's a lot of benefits that we have with the virtual reality because venues are tough to come by. We just heard the presentation earlier. I know for residential properties, it's challenging. For commercial, it's also challenging. And I know for us, we're also getting creative. We get with Mr. San Burnett and ask him, hey, do we have somewhere where we can train? So having the VR headsets makes it a bit more flexible and achievable for us. But we are still working on that. We're meeting here in a few weeks on our 2024 training plans. And that is something that's been a priority with my staff is we need to get this going. But again, I'm also looking forward to when we get that refresh because the next headset, it has a couple more advancements where you don't need to be connected to the Wi-Fi in a building. So if you have poor Wi-Fi, again, it opens up additional options for us to utilize it. It utilizes, from my understanding, more of a Bluetooth type of setup so you can utilize it where there's no Wi-Fi.
Thank you for those details. And are you also saying there isn't a location to utilize the virtual reality component, like an actual physical location?
For us, we have a training room that we can utilize. What I was speaking to was our reality-based training where we use role players and, it's a building or facility where we'll need the space to run a scenario. With the VR headsets, all we need is a training room. And at this point in time, it is working for us and it is going to be a good resource for us.
Thank you so much. I think that's all I have. Thank you and good luck. I hope Axon still or continues to provide the components needed for transparency and also efficiencies. It sounds like in order to do what you need to do for the IPRA, this is definitely a easier task, it sounds like. Thank you.
Other questions from the committee? Just one quick question. So the data that's compiled, we own it or Axion owns it? And can they sell it if they own it?
Madam Chair, my understanding, and it's in the contract, especially when we talk about the My90 and the data that we have, it is the property of the departments. It's not something that is put into a repository where they can pull from. Now, there are certain things that they can receive from devices, like on their performance, like battery life or failures that occur. That information can be shared to help troubleshoot things, but the actual data where there is information or recording of our community on our body-worn cameras, that information is the property of the departments.
And that's true of the drones as well?
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions? Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Second?
Motion and a second to approve this item. Director Oster, can we get a roll call, please?
Certainly, Madam Chair. Counselor Cassett,
Yes.
Counselor Rivera,
Yes.
Councilwoman Villarreal,
Yes.
Chair Romero Worth.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Thank you for being here tonight. Request for approval, we're on to item Q. Request for approval of a budget adjustment resolution for tourism Santa Fe in the total amount of $1,733,593 to allocate FY 23 lodgers tax revenue earned over budgeted estimates to increase budget for salaries, benefits, service contracts, advertising, and consulting for $1,133,593 to increase budget for building structure and furniture and fixtures for $600,000. We have Randy Randall, our Executive Director for Tourism here tonight. Welcome, Mr. Randall, and I believe Councilwoman, you pulled this item.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Director Randall. I actually maybe this would be a question for staff. I don't know if finance would be able to explain like structurally, because when we have a bar, there's some items that go, that are components to it. So like in this case, item R has the request for the, positions. And then item S was for the, Vladimir Jones, the advertising increase. But the request itself for bar was also incorporating a lot of other components. So I'm just curious why this was structured a little bit differently. Because this bar actually has a bunch of different requests bundled into one. And then, so I guess maybe you could try to explain to me why R and S are pulled out. I'm assuming, well, I don't know. I'm not going to make any assumptions. So maybe you could explain that a little bit more.
Yeah, Madam Chair and members of the committee, Councilwoman Villarreal, I think Randy probably can speak to that as well. However, I can tell you a little bit about why the agenda items are shown the way they are. We discussed this with the clerk's office and tried to figure out the best way to present this so that it was clear to the committee and to the public. All three of these items, Q, R, and S, are funded with lodgers tax above what was anticipated and what was originally budgeted. So there are several different uses that Tourism Santa Fe would like to request approval for some of that FY 23 lodgers tax revenue that was earned in excess of budgeted estimates. Item R is the creation of 2 new positions. So item Q is the budget. Item Q is the bar itself. Item R is the creation of 2 new positions that are funded by that budget. And then item S is a contract amendment, which is also funded by that budget. And Director Randall, would you like to add anything?
So maybe just to clarify, those 2 items, the new positions and advertising are covered by lodgers tax increases. And then the other requests, which there's a few that are not those 2, I was trying to figure out what funding source they were coming from.
Madam Chair, Councilwoman, it's a combination of the remaining balance of that 1,000,001 and the $600,000 that would be coming out of fund balances.
Okay, wait, say that
That's why
again.
there's 2 bars. There's one bar to increase the budget by the 1.1. What's the exact
1.133, I think.
Exactly. And then the second bar, and that brings funds from revenue generated current year. And then the $600,000 is a bar to bring funds forward from fund balances that were created in prior years.
Fund balances. So that funding source, the 600,000.
And it's still lodgers tax.
Okay.
It's all lodgers tax fund balance.
All right. That's helpful. So all of these requests are coming from lodgers tax revenues above and beyond what we projected or what we projected.
Madam
Okay.
Chair and Councilwoman, actually, the 1,130,000 is the difference between the revenue that was actually budgeted for this year and the maintenance budget of the department that we approved. So there were actually excess funds that were available in the budgeted revenue. And we're trying to capture those funds to be able to use them in the fiscal year where they're being generated.
Got it. Andy, did you have something to share? You're lingering back there, but I didn't know if you had anything to add. No pressure. I was just curious if you had anything you wanted to add to the mix.
Madam Chair, Councilor Villarreal, yeah, I was just gonna add also, the state puts a limit on, how long we can maintain balances in lodger's tax. So it's kind of an impetus to us to, spend our cash down, just so we don't get in trouble and possibly have to return some of that to the taxpayers. Obviously, we're not against returning to the taxpayers, but it's like, the question becomes, why is your lodger's tax at this level if you're not going to spend it?
Right.
There is, a lodger's tax is, every fund is a little bit different. Every revenue source is different. They have their own rules. This is one of the few where we actually have that, use it or lose it type of a rule happen.
Right.
So, we definitely, don't look askance when Randy comes to us and say, we need to spend some cash, because there is a fair amount of cash in the fund. And if he has a valid use that's consistent with the mayor's and council's priorities, we certainly want to accommodate that as whenever we can.
Okay. And there is restrictions to that as to what it can be used for. So can you just generally tell us what kind of things lodger's tax can cover?
Madam Chair, Councilwoman, the 50% of lodger's tax has to be used for marketing and advertising, and the other 50% can be used for that same reason, or it can be used for other things that benefit or will increase visitation to the city.
So including or adding positions, that's one way that falls into increasing visitations, or how do you fit new positions again?
Madam Chair, Councilwoman, it's kind of interesting. The sixth and seventh point of lodger's tax that we collect that no one else in the state does collect is specifically for the community convention center. And so, and the first use of those extra 2 points of lodger's tax is to ensure the debt service is covered. And a second use is for operating costs of the convention center. So both of those two new positions would fall into that category of approved use. And then a final would be to, again, support advertising and other things that would increase the use of the facility.
Got it. Okay, that sounds good. There is one part that was interesting to me, and it's buying a balloon, buying a Zozobra special shape balloon. And the total cost, it says 300,000. So it says a portion of it, which was 125,000. So how does that work? Or who's putting in the rest of the funding, and who owns the balloon, and who gets to use it, and who gets to ride on the balloon is what I want to know. No, I'm just kidding. I'm curious about that spending, like if that falls under the marketing and advertising, if you could say more about that.
Absolutely, Madam Chair, Councilwoman. First of all, former councilors will have first priority on flying in the balloon. The funding of $300,000, it's being done by the Zozobra and Kiwanis. $150,000 has been committed by Albuquerque. And we're doing
The
125.
city of Albuquerque or
The city of Albuquerque, and I don't know exactly where it came from, but I think it's out of the portion of lodger's tax that Albuquerque doesn't turn over to Visit Albuquerque. As you know, in Albuquerque, the function that we do in Tourism Santa Fe is a third-party group. It's not part of the city. So Albuquerque does retain some lodger's tax for things like this. And so it didn't go through Visit Albuquerque. It came directly from the city. So that's 275,000, and then Kiwanis is raising the other
25,000 from Kiwanis?
from Kiwanis. As to the ownership, that's an interesting question. I guess the Kiwanis would be the owner of it if these funds were committed to it, but I'm not exactly sure. I mean, we could suggest that we retain some ownership. The nice part is the agreement that we have with Kiwanis is the Santa Fe will be displayed on the front of the balloon, and Albuquerque will be on the back of the balloon. And it'll be flown not only at the Albuquerque Balloon Festival as a special shaped balloon, and that'll be a contract service that the city, Kiwanis, and the city of Albuquerque will have to fund on an ongoing basis. But we'll fly it in other regional festivals to bring attention to Santa Fe using Zozoka.
Yeah, I'm curious about that because I've crewed a lot at the Balloon Fiesta, and ballooning is a very expensive sport. So I guess I'm curious about the future maintenance of that, and and also the ownership, because if Kiwanis is putting in just a small amount considering the overall cost, who owns it, I think will be important, and that would also determine who's gonna have to maintain it or pay pilots and so I guess I'd like to know more details about that.
Madam Chair, Councilwoman, as far as the operation of the balloon, we will contribute towards that on an ongoing basis. And it will contribute on the percentage that we put into it. So it'll be about 40% probably of the operating costs. The ownership, I can assure you that unless we find out from an insurance standpoint, we don't want to continue to be the owner, we can structure it in that way. But I haven't gone to legal yet and insurance people yet to determine which is better.
Okay, I think these are things you all are gonna have to deal with, that will be, sounds fun, but then it also is like this whole larger cost that I'm curious who will kind of take on that responsibility, and because there's multiple partners who will be kind of legally obligated. So if you could get back to me about that, that would be good to know. I like the idea of it. I'm just trying to think long-term how this all plays out for us financially. And just, I mean, there's also this liability aspect that I'm curious about too. So sounds great. And also there's more I think about. So I'd like to learn more about that. And then the other piece was, I think the other amount was some consulting to look at the economic impact of 5 major events. Is that just having a contractor that's gonna do an analysis for us?
Madam Chair, Councilwoman, we'd use Southwest Planning, which is the same company that did the economic impact studies pre-COVID. And they were very beneficial to us, and they were also very beneficial to the organizations that are so important to tourism, to help them get grants and other funding from sources, particularly government and foundations.
Sounds good. I think that'll be important data for us. And I think the other ones were convention center capital projects, revamping of the second floor terrace, adding stairs, and then electronic controls. Can you say more about the electronic controls for the elevators?
Madam Chair, Councilwoman, that's actually for the regular doors. We'll be changing out all the hardware eventually, and this will get us started. We have a problem currently with the original hardware. It's quite easy for people from the outside to get in. So we've been actually putting bicycle chains to prevent people from getting in, which also restricts people from getting out if they happen to be in the building, and it's been unsafe. So we've gone ahead with a single door that already has been converted to the electronic locks. And we put a, call that bar that goes in the center of a double door. Right now, the two doors just come together without the bar, but the new configuration will put a bar in, a post in between that can be removed if we needed to bring in something large into the lobby area. And it will then allow us to properly secure the doors without creating a hazard, a safety issue that we've been very concerned about.
And if there's folks that are staying late for, like staff people that are staying late for meetings and they want to get into the garage, what's with this new plan, what changes for them to access the garage?
Madam Chair, Councilwoman, it doesn't affect the elevators, so it doesn't, but I'm working, as an aside, I'm working with parking on a plan to update the controls on those elevators. It's a $500,000 project, and to make sure that we can not only keep them operating, because the controls are old, but also so that we can set the times that they can operate versus be locked down in advance, or make changes very easily and quickly remotely from a telephone. So that is yet another project that will be coming forward, and probably would continue to use fund balances for that kind of capital project.
Sounds good. Yeah, that was, I think, an important one, just
Something we need.
safety-
Absolutely.
Safety reasons. And I think that's it, except for the lights, which I thought commercial grade LED lighting. We're not using commercial grade LED lights right now, correct?
Madam Chair, Councilwoman, I don't think so. And I say commercial grade in here, they've actually are coming out with non-commercial grade lighting now that is much better than it has been. We do just 8 trees, so that would remain year round. And on Valentine's Day, it could be red, and on St. Patrick's Day, it could be green, and we can have a lot of fun with it. But other trees would get an annual lights added so that we don't lose the impact that we all see and love that we get from the plaza, because these lights wouldn't be sufficient to do that. So this would just be an ongoing lighting that we'd carry forward.
Excellent. And it's probably the ones that we keep, the white lights that we keep, those are the 8 trees you're talking about that.
Madam Chair, Councilwoman, yes, and so these lights could be white
Right.
when we don't have something else to celebrate.
Got it. Sounds good. All right, that's all I have. I yield the floor.
Other questions from the committee? Councilwoman Cassett.
Thanks so much, Madam Chair. I pulled R, but we can take care of that now. I did have some similar questions. Thank you, Councilman Vitarella, regarding the Zozobra balloon. I'm sorry, remind me. So this will not just be a 1-year. I mean, we will continue to use it year after year.
Madam Chair, Councilwoman, we definitely will. And I think it's going to be a spectacular balloon. It's about 60, 70 feet tall. I think it'll be hard to fly. But I think when it goes up, it's kind of like the way they celebrate the cow when she's able to go up. I think this will be a great balloon for us.
Wonderful. I had similar questions around continued cost of operation. I think before final passage, I would like to get more information if you are able to get that. I know you mentioned that you still have to speak with
Madam
legal
Chair,
and finance.
Councilwoman, I will have that for you this week.
Wonderful. And then I did just want to cover the new positions and make sure I'm understanding correctly. So we're adding another manager, convention center manager. Is that the appropriate title?
Madam Chair, Councilman, it's a conference services manager.
And we already have 2
We-
conference services managers?
We currently have 2, and this would add a third. What we found, and this is post-COVID, we're getting more local use out of the convention center than we are a 3 or 4 day convention coming in from out of town. The local use takes almost as much time as that convention did, but we'll have 3 or 4 of them, whereas we'd only have 1 meeting planner for the convention. So it has just taxed the 2 people we've got to a point where they're spending all their time working with new clients, and they don't have time to visit the event that they have booked, and we're just not providing the level of service that we'd like to. So we think the solution is to bring in a third conference services manager to take the pressure off the 2. And while I can't guarantee it, we'll have a priority on a bilingual person coming in, because currently our 2 conference services managers do not speak Spanish.
Wonderful. That would be really, really wonderful for us to have that, especially as you mentioned, local use.
Yes.
I know that I've had a number of people, be looking into using the convention center for one-day
Quinceañeras
events
and-
or, performance space is another one that I've had a lot of conversations around, and just how we can better utilize the space. So I'm hoping this means that, these organizations will be able to potentially have better access to at least information. I know that cost can sometimes be prohibitive, which is why, of course, we sponsor, but will that really allow a bit more of the information, a bit more of the guidance on what this would look like and how people can consider this?
Madam Chair, Counselor, it will definitely allow them to have more time to spend with potential clients. But I think, I just think they will be able to do a more complete job.
And the convention specialist, can you tell me a little bit more about that position?
Madam Chair, Counselor, the convention specialist, we currently have 5. That's a great name for a setup crew and maintenance, if you will, because when they're not doing setups and teardowns, they do a lot of cleaning and a lot of maintenance to support our custodial team. You'll hear on Wednesday at the Quality of Life meeting that we actually right now are not keeping the 5 positions full. But we think that, one, if we can advertise a few more, we'll have a better chance of, if we can just maintain 1 or 2 vacancies, I think it'll help us, and we'll get up to 5 or 6. But we really need them to, again, provide the proper support as we're getting busier and busier again over there.
Okay, so we're funding a new position, even though we still have vacancies in this job description.
We will recruit for this along with, we're down to just 1 vacancy at this point. We've just made 2 new hires.
Okay. And is that common to have vacancies in this position, or is this just kind of a bit of an anomaly that while we're asking for another position, while you're asking for another position, you have one open?
It's a post-COVID situation that we've run into. And I think it's not one of the higher wage positions, which makes it harder to not hire for, but to keep. Because that person, as soon as they can make another 50 cents in the private sector or another spot, they move on. And hopefully, we're very hopeful that the comp and class study that's been done will show that hotels are hiring at $2 to $3 more than we are.
So that said, just curious.
We're going to
about-
get it filled one way or the other.
Well, just curious about adding the new position as opposed to taking those dollars and potentially raising the current funded position.
Madam Chair, Counselor, we can do both. We literally can do both if we need to.
Okay, well, I guess we'll follow up on this one at budget hearings in April. So with that, I have no further questions. Thank you.
Counselor Rivera.
I just want to ask if you can send the answers that you're going to send the Councilwoman Villarreal, I think, to the entire committee.
Madam Chair, Council, definitely. I will send it to the committee and probably I'll send it to council because I'm guessing they may have the same question. I'll send it to the Quality of Life Committee as well, if we can get it done in time by Wednesday, so that everyone has access to that. Absolutely. Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Thank you. And I'll just echo my colleagues. I think we do definitely need more information about this balloon. Both who's going to own it, who's going to manage the long-term costs, and I'm very concerned about the liability. And it's concerning to me that you have not been in touch with legal, and that seems like something we absolutely need them to be aware of and to be advising on, and having some sense about what insurance costs would be, who's gonna, how are we gonna share that if we're sharing it, or are we just putting up money towards something that we may not own, and whether we can even do that. And I think there are a number of red flags and questions. And again, it does sound, I mean, I love the cow at the balloon fiesta. It's an incredible balloon, and certainly Zozobra is an incredible symbol for this community. So, you know, it's exciting, but also as people who have to watch out for the city's interests, I think there are a number of things we need to know before this gets to the governing body meeting. So just want to echo that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And certainly, if we found out that the liability concerns or other things didn't allow this to move forward, even if it was an approved expenditure, we wouldn't move forward with it if it made no sense for the city. So I will get that information. Thank you.
Yeah, and I guess I'm just uncomfortable approving money for something that we don't know whether it's feasible for the city. So I think that work needs to be done on the front end. But anyway, I appreciate the idea. I mean, I don't want to be a wet blanket, so to speak, but I do think there's, yeah, I don't want to keep the balloon from flying, but I think we need to, we need some more information. So just want to echo that concern.
Okay.
Thanks for being here tonight. Do we have a motion on, so I think we're on Q, correct? And maybe we can get a motion on item Q.
Move to approve for the time being.
Second, even though I think maybe there's a caveat to get additional information.
Yeah, I think that's been made clear. All right, we have a motion and a second to approve item Q. If we could get a roll call, please.
Counselor Cassidy,
Yes.
Counselor Rivera, Councilwoman Villarreal,
Yes.
Chair Romero Worth.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Great. And we also, while we have you up there at the podium, have item R, which was the request for approval to create 2 new positions, convention specialist and convention service manager for tourism Santa Fe. I don't know, are there other questions on this item from the committee? And if not, is there a motion?
Move to approve.
We have a motion and a second to approve item R to create 2 new positions. If we could get a roll call on this item, please.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry, I missed the second. Was that Counselor Rivera?
Counselor Rivera made the second.
Thank you. Counselor Cassidy,
Yes.
Counselor Rivera, Councilwoman Villarreal,
Yes.
Chair Romero Worth.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right. Thank you for being
Thank you.
here. All right, we have 2 more items. The next one is item AA, request for approval of fiscal year 24 budget increases for the land use department in the total amount of $356,382. We have our land use director, Jason Kluk, here with us. And did you, yeah, Councilwoman Cassett, you pulled this item.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Director Click, for being here. First, I'm excited to see some of these positions, especially the strategic planner. So thank you for putting that in. I was hoping to hear a bit more about some of the technology requests that are here, what these software solutions will be doing, and if they are part of InterGov, if they are instead of InterGov, and how that's going to coordinate with our current system that we updated, what, 3 years ago?
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, Councilor Cassidy. Thank you for the question. I appreciate it. So just big picture, since I've been in land use, we've definitely been looking for solutions that are not necessarily related to InterGov, but also related to InterGov. These are mainly not related to InterGov. And we've really, we've been looking periodically, this is not the only thing we do, obviously, but, in all of our spare time, we've been looking periodically over the last 3.5 years for, these kind of digital solutions that we could integrate and, improve customer service. And I have to say, we've struggled quite a bit until very recently. I think the industry is just catching up with the community development, kind of need. And so all the solutions that we're looking at, I don't want to talk about them because we're not even in procurement yet. So, but these are actual software solutions that are available on the market. I've presented them in a, kind of generic fashion, so to speak, but these are actual solutions that we're looking for. And, yeah, they're basically, I'm happy to talk about each one, but basically we need a solution that we've talked about before in budget, a quote unquote mini CRM, customer relationship management, appointment, software that makes it easy for customers and the public it makes it easy to channelize communications so that they can make an appointment or make a request and get directly to a clearinghouse email or a person's email who is, manning that and ready to answer their question or to begin the process with them or, whatever, land use activity they may need help with. So we have an actual solution that can, start to address that problem, or, the bigger concern. We definitely still need a position to help manage communications within land use, but I think this will be a good first start. And it'll also help us, raise service level for this particular issue, while we're still building our human resources within the department. The second one, the planning and development process guide solution. So again, this is another software that is outside of InterGov, and it's actually completely standalone. It has a parent company that has a software that's similar to InterGov that I think we want to look at, but we're not anywhere near that. We want to, see if we even go with this solution, we want to see how it performs before we even entertain, changing horses, so to speak. So that could be, maybe a conversation for next budget cycle, not this one. But anyway, so it's a standalone planning and development guide, which basically integrates Esri, GIS information for properties and building and land use code. And the constituent or customer goes in, they enter their property address, they give a brief explanation about the use that they intend, or the land use activity that they're interested in. And then once they do that, it leads to a series of questions that are code-based on their property and the code parameters for that use. And it spits out a checklist of criteria for that activity. So it's pretty amazing. And I think it'll, definitely help us with capacity and also help, the peace of mind of customers and land use staff. And so we're excited about that. Both of those first two solutions, again, I don't want to talk too much about the procurement side of it, but they're fairly inexpensive solutions to start up and maintain. And the commitment for land use staff will be kind of, moderate, not too heavy of a lift to implement those. Then the final one is this planning and development digital user platform. We spoke to this with the RFP, the general plan update RFP resolution. So you all have already, seen this a little bit. So we do want a digital platform that's, basically a engagement and resource access and a digital gateway, so to speak, for the public, for counselors, for staff, anybody that's interested, any stakeholders that are interested in the general plan update. And we really want it to be a repository for all of those processes that are involved with the general plan update. But also, once the general plan is updated, is completed, a platform for implementation. And not to mention a data-rich platform where people can actually access, development plans, master plans, plats, that kind of information, so it's integrated into that system. And I think it could even be more than that eventually, but we want it to be basically a landing page that has, links to everything land use in the city of Santa Fe, and then also a repository for this, critical information and an immediate way to access the general plan, the new general plan digitally in a nutshell. And so that's a bigger proposition. That will probably be if we actually just got responses for the RFP last Thursday, I believe. I'm not allowed to look at them. As the financial administrator for the land use department. Anyway, so we got those recently, and hopefully they've all responded in a fashion that that we're looking for this digital platform. And the bulk of this money, or this this funding, will be spent on that platform. We want it to be a very, again, I wouldn't say complicated. We want it to be very clean and easy to read, but we want it to be very information rich, and so it won't be cheap to build out. But I think this is the opportunity to do it. We also have additional funding, as you probably know, for the general plan update, and about 50 to 75,000 that we could also put on top of the 240 for the general plan update. And whether we spend that all in phase one or not, I don't know yet, but at least I think I'm feeling pretty confident that we have enough funding to get going in a good way with phase one.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. And I really like that planning and development. Back to the, I can't even read my own notes. The second one that you talked about, that's not InterGov, but it's kind of, it sounds like it's kind of a competitive or a competition to InterGov, the parent company. Are we going to have any challenges with the integration there of, using those two separate platforms? I know one's kind of more, looks like it's more constituent facing, of they get to put information in, but they would still then be using InterGov for that e-permitting process.
Madam Chair, Councilor Cassett, that's correct. So this planning and development process guide is standalone.
Okay.
The parent company has software that can integrate with, like, for example, Tyler Cashiering. We've already vetted that. We've had just a couple demos and conversations. We haven't gone very far into looking at this, and I again, I want to be really, cognizant of the fact that while InterGov has its challenges, it is part of a bigger ERP with Tyler, and it functions right. It's not like it's broken. The full integration has proven difficult, and we're working on that with IT in the background slowly but surely. But yes, I'd say, on that note, we are at a crossroads, so to speak, because there are other solutions out there that have, I think, addressed some of the issues that InterGov has, and maybe are potentially better platforms. Again, I'm not speaking ill of InterGov or Tyler at all. I'm just saying there's alternatives out there, and I think we want to consider them so that we, are giving the optimal experience to our staff and customers. But I think to answer your question, any solution that we chose would be able to integrate with the Tyler ERP solution.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. And then regarding the first one, as the mini CRM, you mentioned communications appointments. Will this also take what we currently put in through the not mini CRM, the big CRM? So would constituent services have to be dealing with two different systems, or is this, still if we're getting requests for code enforcement to go look at XYZ, we send it through constituent services, that goes into the CRM. This one is more, hey, I can't get an appointment and I need to talk to you about my permit.
Right, Madam Chair, Councilor Cassett, that's correct. This mini CRM, it is a CRM. That's why I'm calling it that, but I'm calling it, I use the term mini because yes, we have the bigger constituent services CRM. It'll be the same function, but purely inside of land use.
All right, wonderful. Thanks so much. No further questions.
Councilwoman Villarreal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Director Klug, for being here. I guess I'm confused as to why we would want to put another software system that's not compatible with the ERP platform. And, you know, Intergov, there's a reason why everybody's kind of tied into it. And I guess I'm trying to understand the compatibility factor, and also if you're adding another software component, you're still going to have to use ITT to support your system. So I guess I just think of that as another bureaucratic level for them to have to deal with another system that's not, you know, it's not tied into Intergov. So can you say why you're, I don't know, I'm kind of concerned about this.
Madam Chair, Councilor Villarreal, thank you for the question. I appreciate it. So I want to just make one clarification. So the bigger, you know, quote unquote replacement for Intergov, that's not being entertained in this request or in general right now. You know, we're just probing and looking, you know, at alternatives. That's the first thing. The second thing, the parent company for this potential planning and development guide, they do they could integrate with Tyler, which means eventually this program could integrate with Tyler, but there's no reason for it to. It's a standalone data in, data out kind of software. You know, you put in your permit criteria and it spits out requirements. That's all it does. It's actually, I mean, it's a really nice program, and it has a back end where staff can see what the constituents have requested, but that's it. That's all it does. Is it's basically it's a fantastic program, but in essence, it's a glorified checklist. And so that it can be standalone. And because of that, I think it will, and we've talked to the consultants and IT about this. I think there will be a really low level of needed support from IT. Basically, we'll have to work with GIS with the startup, and after that, their back end is really easy to work with, and it could be land use staff that, you know, maintains it. Obviously, IT will have to have a part, but I think it'll be pretty minimal. Did I answer all your questions?
Yeah, I just think that we're not thinking about the long-term consequences, and I feel like I've been here before, like in a twilight zone where we've tried to use other systems in other departments and they weren't tied into the bigger platform. And in the end, we decided not to use it. I'm not saying land use per se, but I'm thinking about other departments in the last, I don't know how many years that we've been trying to do different things. And like, finally, we have this Intergov system. I know it's not perfect, but at least we have, well, we have the knowledge of it from ITT perspective, but also I think there's even technical assistance. So I guess I'm just concerned about trying to find something new and really trying to understand what the bigger issue is for you all and why you're looking for another platform. I mean, really, what is the root cause of why you're potentially thinking about a new system?
Madam Chair, Councilor Villarreal. So if you're speaking to the replacement to Intergov,
Correct.
so I think we're looking at it because we've seen significant areas of challenge in fully integrating Intergov. And there are companies out there that have solved some of those problems, and we've read about it and spoken to their representatives about it, and they have real answers to some of these challenges. And most of them are very technically related, and I probably couldn't even go into them in a technical aspect right now. But definitely if you're interested, we could look at those in more depth with you all or anybody on the council. I'm happy to do that. And again, it's not broken. It's the ERP system that we bought, and it's functioning. There are significant challenges to fully integrating it that we've seen these other solutions might do a better job. And yes, it'll still be a heavy lift, right? Because to your point, we'll have to not really start from scratch, but in a way that we'll be starting over. And you know, there's a reality where I think that's okay and,
Well-
and beneficial to land use and our customers.
I hope so, because, you know, trying to migrate information from one platform to, or one system to another doesn't sound very, well, it just sounds time consuming for all of you, including IT, so.
That part's
Yes.
actually pretty, sorry to interject, that part, that's actually one of the easier parts.
The integrate, the,
Yeah, the difficult part of InterGov or any solution of this nature is to tailor their system to work for individual divisions that have, you know, very different criteria and and, you know, and interact with the public in very different ways. You know, permitting it's complex, but in one sense, it's kind of a, you know, I'm very, you know, I'm simplifying it, but it's kind of an off-on procedure, right? You either pass the code or you don't. You know, planning is the same way, but it's very nuanced, like with, you know, nonconformities, those kind of things, right? That it really takes more of a, I guess
Yes.
a more nuanced approach to analyzing the code, so to speak. So in that regard, you know, it's hard to just, you know, come up with a basis for an InterGov planning case, for example. You know, it's just difficult. It's not to say that we can't do it. And it might be difficult for this new system as well, but we know that, we've had challenges with InterGov to do that. Sorry, maybe I wasn't super clear about that, but anyway,
yeah, I don't know if Heather or Director Lamboy has her hand up as well.
Thank you, Councilmember Villarreal and Chair. What we're trying to do here is to set the stage. In other jurisdictions, there's been a lot of integration with geographic information systems so that you can actually pick a piece of property and know the zoning, know what historic status of a building is, know the tax ID number. There's all sorts of things that are really customer friendly. And eventually we would like to get to a point where somebody could pull up a development plan or a subdivision plan, for instance. So these aren't meant to be competing programs. They're actually meant to help supplement. You know, InterGov has been a heavy lift, like Director Klug mentioned, and we're trying to work within what we have capacity to do now to program on our side of things to make it as user-friendly as possible. But we've discovered with a number of customers that we have and the more technologically astute people have and their expectations, we'd like to be a little more user-friendly and set the stage for a full InterGov you know, coordination. But right now is getting that information to people, I think is really important.
So I don't know who, I think the Director Klug talked about InterGov not being compatible with GIS, or it is compatible, correct?
yes, InterGov uses GIS. It has GIS integration. It works.
Yeah, I guess
We would
I'm
like it
just,
to be better.
I guess I'm just thinking that, I don't know.
Yeah, right now,
Working
we
with-
just have the GIS platform separate from InterGov, though. And this would eventually create the bridge to have it as part of InterGov, but not everybody uses InterGov. There's a lot of people that just go to the GIS page of the website.
I'd like to point out, if I may, when Director Isaacson was still here, I think Carol Johnson had just left. We had a big meeting with IT to talk about the capabilities of Esri. I don't know if you all remember that or not. It's been like 3.5 years ago, where, you know, Esri was talking about this kind of pin drop technology, right? That where staff and constituents would have all this information at their fingertips, right? So that's what we're trying to do with the general plan update software that Director Lamboy was speaking to. But also, I think we just, you know, I think it was really valuable for the Tyler upgrade to happen and to go to HTML with Tyler. I think that helped a lot, and, you know, citywide to have the hub where you can access everything in one place. So Again, I don't want to give you the impression that I think InterGov's broken because it's not. I just, like I said, I think there are other solutions developing quickly out there that could far surpass it as far as customer service capability for staff and the customers. With a full build out that's easy to use and that staff can use quickly. Like right now, it's a pretty heavy learning curve to really know how to use these individual modules in planning and in InterGov. I mean, once you do it, it's pretty quick. But we had one demo with this other company, and like literally in 5-10 minutes, like I knew exactly, probably because we have experience with InterGov, but I knew exactly how to navigate their system. It was super user friendly and kind of WYSIWYG, what you see is what you get kind of experience. So again, like we have no intention of abandoning InterGov. It's actually not even our choice, right? Land use. It's definitely a much bigger conversation with you all in the city administration. But I think we would be remiss if we weren't looking.
Well, I just warn you that contractors can always make sure that their product sounds like the best, but when it comes down to like integration and how it puts, how it's working as a system as a whole, I don't know. I'm kind of skeptical about some of these things. I just wish we could. Yeah, I just think it's going to be a heavier lift for IT and having another system that they're going to have to be responsible for. So,
and I want to assure you that we have our eye on that, right? Because we've been working with InterGov and having these problems. I mean, even before InterGov, right? We understand those challenges for sure. And we had them with Tyler. I think you would have them with any company on some level, but believe me, we're watching that like a hawk.
So is the InterGov, what system utilizes, I know we had this issue recently where a constituent was trying to get permit approval for windows, and it said that they were in the escarpment, and they're in this full-fledged neighborhood that isn't up in the mountains. So I'm wondering if something like that, is that a system issue?
That
is that like how we code it in the
Apologize.
system?
Madam Chair, Councilor Villarreal, that's a coding issue with the escarpment overlay map.
Okay.
It basically doesn't have sharp edges.
Right.
So it kind of grazed the back of her property outside of the area. So it's good that we caught it because that's how the front desk staff is trained, right? If it's in the escarpment, they flag it for escarpment, but they're not the experts. D is, and once she got involved, and sure enough, it wasn't a problem.
Yeah, okay, so that's more of a coding. I was just trying to figure out. Well, I'm a little concerned, so I guess you all are gonna have to figure this out and the governing body will have to be involved, but yeah, I think we should have something that's reading each other, and I want you all to be efficient and effective as well, so yeah, I think this is a bigger thing that you all will have to deal with. We won't, but so that's all I have for tonight.
Other questions from the committee? Councilor Rivera.
Madam Chair, so Director Klug, my sister-in-law recently put up a fence at her residence and she couldn't navigate the computer really well, so I helped her through it and it took much longer than I thought. And I hope this will fix some of that. So some of the issues were finding the rules, the subdivision plat, and then the residence outline itself. Those be readily available or easier to track down?
Madam Chair, Councilor Rivera, yes, that's our plan. And you just mentioned two of the the programs that we're looking at. One would be the digital platform for the general plan, where we want to be able to have that plat information, and it'll still it'll take some navigation because we want it to be a data rich environment, but also I personally will be very mindful of the design being user friendly, so people can find that and then they know where to go to get it right. And we can have these links right on the very front on the the land use landing page, and then the second one would be addressed by this user guide. I wish you, I mean, I would be happy to give you all a presentation of it, you know, whenever we get further down the road. Or let the company representative give you a demonstration. Anyway, I was pretty amazed how user-friendly it is. And it basically just like spits out a list of a checklist of the items you need in an order of operation that's easy to understand. The caveat is development is not for the faint of heart, right? I mean, it takes, sometimes it takes interpretation. And if some of these objects are things that, normal, quote unquote, normal people are unfamiliar with, right? So that's a challenge. And then that's where the first one comes in, right? If somebody needs to make an appointment, they'll hopefully be able to access a real human being quickly and, make an appointment to talk things through that they don't understand. So we're trying to address these issues holistically for sure, and we have been for a while. I mean, we've all known, I think these issues have been known for years. I think we're just now getting to the point where the software companies are catching up to the community development needs, and we're able to start having these conversations.
And will downloading documents be easier? She had to hand draw where she was going to put the fence and then send it back in.
Madam Chair, Councilor Rivera, so that's a function of the CSS platform. That's the kind of the customer facing side of EnerGov. And so right now, depending on the permit type, I think with her permit type, she was able to just upload it again. So that system does work. It's not super user friendly, but once you've done it a few times, it's pretty easy to navigate. And I think, one of the challenges when people are doing this for the first time, it can be a little bit tricky. Again, we want to be able to channelize the communications that, for challenges that people are having so they can get to a live human quickly.
Anything that can make process easier.
Any other questions from the committee? Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Motion and a second to approve this item. Director Oster, can we get a roll call, please?
Counselor Cassett,
Yes.
Counselor Rivera,
Yes.
Councilwoman Villarreal,
Yes.
Mayor Romero Royce.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, our last item is item AB, request for approval of a budget amendment resolution in the amount of $175,000 to allocate FY23 gross receipts tax revenue earned over budgeted estimates to Public Works to engage a consultant to compile Public Works elements for the City Code Chapter 14 Land Development Code revision. We have Director Wheeler here, and I believe Councilwoman Cassett. I'm calling you Councilwoman tonight. That works. Seems to be my default.
Works.
I think you pulled this item.
I did. And Director Klug, if you're still in the room, you may hang around. So I was just curious about why we are in need of a consultant for this aspect. I guess why Clarion doesn't cover this. I know that I've had a lot of conversations with MPO, with Jean about these. And so I was a little surprised to see the need for a consultant here. And again, why this is not covered with the consultant that we already have for the Chapter 14 update and or the consultants we were about to get for the general plan update, which I know is related. So just wondering why we need additional support for this.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, Councilor Cassett. I was a little surprised to find that out too. We had thought that the Chapter 14 update would include all aspects. But we were notified about a year ago, actually, that it was not in the scope. They would not be doing our new complete streets cross sections, our new traffic impact analysis, our new, and just so you know, it's a massive piece of work that this is going to be, and it isn't that surprising that maybe they knew that, but we didn't when we put out the RFP. So Jean, we're lucky to be in a very strong position to do this work right now. We have a spectacular traffic engineer in Jean Wolfenbarger. We have a traffic operations professional engineer. We haven't had that role filled in 8 years with Mike Damelin. So now we really have, we work closely with MPO. We've had a really cross-functional collaborative team working on all our capital projects and really pushing the boundaries of how do we build our streets to be safe for everybody in this town, slower, narrower, more bike paths, wider sidewalks. And so we're changing fundamentally how infrastructure is built in this city. And the current code doesn't come anywhere near describing what we want it to describe, right? And it doesn't come anywhere near, so it's not as detailed as we want to be. It doesn't provide the guidelines. So there's really extensive updates, and I can read you some of the sort of almost 30 items I have here that we already have as the table of contents for this piece of code. There will actually 3 technical manuals that will be addenda to the city code. And it will be, the first manual will be the complete streets cross-section, a transportation element that'll do things like the striping, the cross sections, and the stormwater. So we really need to update our stormwater information. Actually, this piece doesn't exist there. This engineering addendum to the code does not exist. So this is a brand new thing. So the first one will be the complete streets cross section and stormwater. The second piece will be or drainage for roadways. Second piece will be traffic operations, so signals, street lighting, outdoor lighting, those kinds of things. And then the third volume will be the new parks and stormwater technical guidance. So I think really ultimately, I was surprised as you were that we weren't included. And now I realize that the team has really dove into this. And there's a big piece of work to create something that has never existed to improve our built infrastructure.
Okay, well, it's good to know it's a larger piece than it sounded like. If you don't mind emailing that list of 30, that'd be really interested to see. And I'm really happy to hear, you know, that we are looking at a very tight integration, I'm hoping, between Chapter 14 as well as all of the requirements around streets and looking at complete streets. I assume then, and maybe I shouldn't assume, I should ask, will this contractor be working closely with Clarion? How do we make sure that, you know, we don't have these two working in silos and all of a sudden we get these two different pieces that aren't quite collaborating, they're not quite meeting with each other? I would really hate to see that happen.
That's a great point. Thank you, Madam Chair and Councilor Cassett. And even more importantly, so that'll be a piece of their work, is their work is for us to make this thing code connected, right? So our people are the technical experts. We're doing a bunch of research on code in other cities. We're actually writing most of the code ourselves, but we're not like writing it in code format, and we're not like connecting it to the code. So that will be the job of this consultant, is to make sure it ties into Chapter 14 properly. But the other thing that we're really going to do too is there's a lot of stakeholders to this code. Developers are stakeholders, engineers, the engineers that work for the developers, the public is a stakeholder of this code. And so we really want to make sure that the stakeholders understand, and the council is the stakeholder of this code, as is land use and everybody involved in the Chapter 14 project. So we'll be definitely, you know, working our way through a very big stakeholder process that will include, of course, collaborating with Clarion and land use.
Wonderful. And then also, you know, there have been some pretty vocal advocates, especially the American Heart Association, for, you know, moving forward with the Complete Streets Ordinance. And so I want to make sure, obviously, you know, as we're doing a lot of the community engagement, making sure that we are reaching out to those individuals who have really been expressing an interest in this, and include them in that stakeholder piece.
That's a great suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you. I have no further questions at this time.
Other questions? Is there a motion? Move to approve?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve item AB. Can we get a roll call, please?
Certainly, Madam Chair. Councilor Cassett,
Yes.
Councilor Rivera,
Yes.
Councilwoman Villarreal,
Yes.
Chair Romero Worth.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right. So we don't have items on discussion tonight. We do not have an executive session. Matters from staff,
None at this time.
matters from the committee. Counselor Rivera.
One thing that I noticed kind of late, but items O and P, I think it's O and P, are only coming to finance in then straight to governing body, where the other ones have a quality of life. It looks like most of them have quality of life. So just wondering what happened with that.
Good question, Madam Chair and Councilors. Councilor Rivera, we asked the same question. And because those contracts are for legal, they don't normally have a second committee assignment. They would just go to finance because they have a fiscal impact, and then to governing body. So that was the reason for that. And I did consult with the city attorney on that, and she confirmed that this type of contract doesn't normally go to a second committee.
Mhm. Yeah, and I don't think, I know it's just a lot of these are just financial in nature, but I think it's just so more counselors would have been able to take a look at it before I got to governing body, but just curious about that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Counselor. Other matters from the committee, Counselor Cassett.
Just wanted to thank both of you for our time together on finance, and obviously all those time budget hearings. We get to spend a lot of time together in April, and really, really have appreciated both of your knowledge and passing that along to me over the last 4 years. And I know we have some more meetings, so I won't, go too far, but thank you. It really, it's been an honor serving with both of you. It's been an honor being here on the Finance Committee with both of you, and you will be very missed.
Madam Chair, thank you.
Counselor Rivera.
Thank you both as well, all of you. It's been a great committee. I've enjoyed sitting on it. I know you have a lot of plans moving forward, and things are moving slower than you probably wanted, but I think you're headed in the right direction, and I think this committee will do well by you. Better run again or not, still to be determined, but I think at least for the next 2 years, it looks extremely promising. Wish you luck on that, and wish you luck with the new committee members, whoever they may be. I just wanted to tell Director Oster, thank you for coming to the city. It's been a pleasure working with you. Every time I've spoken with you, you've always been upfront. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Other matters from the committee? Councilwoman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to, reflections, I guess. I was thinking about when I started on finance, and I don't even remember actually. But it's, we've changed, and the leadership has changed, and so many processes have changed. But I have to say that it's been a hard few years, but I really have appreciated our team here. And I always say that our chair is the taskmaster. I think it helps, though, especially when we have so many items and things to consider. And so I just wish you all the best of luck, and hope you get the right fit for other members that will serve with you. And I'm just appreciative that I was able to serve on this committee and contribute. And I feel good about the time I've spent here, and just excited for you all. And actually, I won't miss the budget hearings, I have to say. Somehow we'll have to change that for you all, so that it's not so tedious for staff and council. So hopefully you can find that happy medium. And I just wanted to thank Director Oster. It's been a pleasure working with you. In the past, it's been very frustrating at times not getting the information I need, or feeling like it hasn't been transparent. But I think since you've been in your position, you really changed the culture of the department. And working with a big vacancy, I think, is really challenging. And it's not fair to assume that you can solve all problems in a matter of, let's see, how long have you been here now? Has it been a year, over a year now? Barely over a year?
Madam Chair, maybe 15 months.
Yeah. So I appreciate that you've been tackling systemic problems, as well as looking at and appreciating your staff in a way that's why we haven't had as high turnover. So I just really appreciate the work you've done and then trying to balance that with, audits. And as I think I had said in the paper or to other people asking me, well, what takes so long? It's a snowball effect. When you start getting behind, it's really hard to catch up, and we've caught up, but it's still, there's time that we need to figure out. So I appreciate your resilience and also just staying positive and above the fray. And so thank you for all that you've taught us, and I just really admire you for the knowledge you share with us and ways that we can understand it. And so thank you, and I wish you the best of luck. And I just want to send you blessings for the future and finishing audits. So thank you so much.
Okay, we'll move from matters from the chair, and I want to thank both Councilor Rivera and Councilwoman Villarreal for their years of service. We're losing a lot with the two of you, a 3-term counselor, a 2-term counselor. There's a lot of knowledge walking out the door with the two of you. I wish you the best, but you're leaving big shoes to fill. And I just want to say I've really appreciated our time together. I think this committee has functioned very well. And we have, as Councilor Cassett said, spent a lot of time together. And I think I've really appreciated how this group brings a range of experience to the work that we do. And I think, the questions, we all have kind of a different angle, a different thing we focus on. And I think it really helps the overall product and shaping of what we do. And so you're going to be missed. It's a lot of experience walking out the door. So again, thank you for your service. Thank you for being collaborative and constructive partners in this committee. I think it's very high functioning. And a lot of that is due to the people who make this up, make up the committee. And again, just really appreciate the contributions that you've had. And, if you want to stop in and see us during budget hearing, bring us, a snack or, just break it up a little bit. I have spoken with Director Oster about how going forward, maybe we can break up the work of the budgeting process so we don't, do everything all in one hit. I have looked a little bit at how other cities handle their budget, and they don't spend nearly the amount of time, but I also think they do more budgeting work throughout the year. And kind of, again, as we've talked about, as soon as these audits are caught up, I really want to be providing more oversight. And I think that'll help give us a better sense of, where we are as a city and how projects are moving forward or aren't moving forward, and just hearing from department staff more frequently so that it's not just that one opportunity and we've got all our questions all built up over a year. So just kind of spreading that work out. But we'll see if we can make it happen. But really appreciate the work that you all have put into this. It's significant, and you'll be missed. So thank you. Appreciate it. All right, we do not have any other meetings this year. So that's another sad note. We won't be getting together until 2024. So, and we will have a new committee. So we'll see everybody then. And until then,